The Wood Beyond the World. Chapter 24. The maid tells of what had befallen her. Now, friend, by the clear of the moon and this firelight will I tell what I may and can of my tale. Thus it is, if I be wholly of the race of Adam, I wot not, nor can I tell thee how many years old I may be. For there are, as it were, shards or gaps in my life, wherein are but a few things dimly remembered and doubtless many things forgotten. I remember well when I was a little child and right happy, and there were people about me whom I loved and who loved me. It was not in this land, but all things were lovely there, the year's beginning, the happy mid-year, the year's waning, the year's ending, and then again its beginning. That passed away, and then for a while is more than dimness, for naught I remember save that I was. Thereafter I remember again, and am a young maiden, and I know some things and long to know more. I am nowise happy, I am amongst people who bid me go, and I go, and do this, and I do it. None loveth me, none tormenteth me, but I wear my heart in longing for I scarce know what. Neither then am I in this land, but in a land that I love not, and a house that is big and stately, but not lovely. Then is a dim time again, and sit hence a time not right clear, an evil time, wherein I am older, well nigh grown to womanhood. There are many folk about me, and they foul, and greedy, and hard, and my spirit is fierce, and my body feeble, and I am set to tasks that I would not do, by them that are unwiser than I, and smitten I am by them that are less valiant than I, and I know lack, and stripes, and divers misery. But all that is now become but a dim picture to me, save that amongst all these unfriends is a friend to me, an old woman who telleth me sweet tales of other life, wherein all is high and goodly, or at the least valiant and doughty. And she setteth hope in my heart, and learneth me, and mocketh me to know much. Oh much, so that at last I am grown wise, and wise to be mighty if I durst. Yet am I not in this land all this while, but, as meseemeth, in a great and a foul city. And then, as it were, I fall asleep, and in my sleep is not, save here and there a wild dream, some deal lovely, some deal hideous, but of this dream is my mistress a part, and the monster, withal, whose head thou didst cleave today. But when I am awakened from it, then am I verily in this land, and myself as thou sayest me today. And the first part of my life here is this, that I am in the pillared ball yonder, half-clad and with bound hands, and the dwarf leadeth me to the lady, and I hear his horrible croak as he saith, Lady, will this one do? And then the sweet voice of the lady saying, This one will do, thou shalt have thy reward, now set thou the token upon her. Then I remember the dwarf dragging me away, and my heart sinking for fear of him, but for that time he did me no more harm than the rivetting upon my leg this iron ring which here thou sayest. So from that time forward I have lived in this land, and been the thrall of the lady, and I remember my life here day by day, and no part of it has fallen into the dimness of dreams. Thereof will I tell thee but little, but this I will tell thee, that in spite of my past dreams, or it may be because of them, I had not lost the wisdom which the old woman had erst learned me, and for more wisdom I longed. Maybe this longing shall now make both thee and me happy, but for the passing time it brought me grief. For at first my mistress was indeed wayward with me, but as any great lady might be with her bought thrall, whiles caressing me and whiles chastising me, as her mood went, but she seemed not to be cruel of malice, or with any set purpose. But so it was rather little by little than by any great sudden uncovering of my intent, that she came to know that I also had some of the wisdom whereby she lived her queenly life. That was about 2 years after I was first her thrall, and 3 weary years have gone by since she began to see in me the enemy of her days. Now why or wherefore I know not, but it seemeth that it would not avail her to slay me outright, or suffer me to die, but not withheld her from piling up griefs and miseries on my head. At last she set her servant, the dwarf, upon me, even he whose head thou clavest today. Many things I bore from him whereof it were unseemly for my tongue to tell before thee, but the time came when he exceeded, and I could bear no more, and then I showed him this sharp knife, wherewith I would have thrust me through to the heart if thou hadst not pardoned me e'en now. And I told him that if he forbore me not, I would slay, not him, but myself, and this he might not away with because of the commandment of the lady, who had given him the word that in any case I must be kept living. And her hand, withal, fear held somewhat hereafter. Yet was there need to me of all my wisdom, for with all this her hatred grew, and whiles raged within her so furiously that it overmastered her fear, and at such times she would have put me to death if I had not escaped her by some turn of my lore. Now further, I shall tell thee that somewhat more than a year ago hither to this land came the king's son, the second goodly man, as thou art the third, whom her sorceries have drawn hither since I have dwelt here. Forsooth, when he first came, he seemed to us, to me, and yet more to my lady, to be as beautiful as an angel, and sorely she loved him, and he her, after his fashion, but he was light-minded and cold-hearted. And in a while he must needs turn his eyes upon me, and offer me his love, which was but foul and unkind as it turned out, for when I naysayed him, as maybe I had not done save for fear of my mistress, he had no pity upon me. but spared not to lead me into the trap of her wrath and leave me without help or a good word. But, O friend, in spite of all grief and anguish, I learned still, and waxed wise, and wiser, abiding the day of my deliverance, which has come, and thou art come. Therewith she took Walter's hands and kissed them, but he kissed her face, and her tears wet her lips. Then she went on, but hence, months ago, the lady began to weary of this dastard, despite of his beauty, and then it was thy turn to be swept into her net. I partly guess how. For on a day in broad daylight, as I was serving my mistress in the hall, an evil thing, whose head is now cloven, was lying across the threshold of the door, as it were a dream fell upon me, though I strove to cast it off for fear of chastisement. For the pillared hall wavered and vanished from my sight, and my feet were treading a rough stone pavement instead of the marble wonder of the hall, and there was the scent of the salt sea and of the tackle of ships, and behind me were tall houses, and before me the ships indeed, with their ropes beating and their sails flapping and their masts wavering, and in mine ears was the hail and howl of mariners, things that I had seen and heard in the dimness of my life gone by. And there was I and the dwarf before me and the lady after me, going over the gangway aboard of a tall ship, and she gathered way and was gotten out of the haven, and straightway I saw the mariners cast abroad their ancient. Quoth Walter, What then? Sawest thou the blazon thereon of a wolf-like beast ramping up against a maiden? And that might well have been thou. She said, Yea, so it was, but refrain thee that I may tell on my tale. The ship and the sea vanished away, but I was not back in the hall of the Golden House, and again were we three in the street of the self-same town which we had but just left, but somewhat dim was my vision thereof. And I saw little save the door of a goodly house before me, and speedily it died out, and we were again in the pillared hall wherein my thraldom was made manifest. Maiden, said Walter, one question I would ask thee, to wit, didst thou see me on the quay by the ships? Nay, she said, there were many folk about, but they were all as images of the aliens to me. Now hearken further. 3 months thereafter came the dream upon me again, when we were all three together in the pillared hall, and again was the vision somewhat dim. Once more we were in the street of a busy town, but all unlike to that other one, and there were men standing together on our right hands by the door of a house. Yea, quoth Walter, and forsooth, one of them was who but I. Refrain thee, beloved, she said, for my tale draweth to its ending, and I would have thee hearken heedfully, for maybe thou shalt once again deem my deed past pardon. Some 20 days after this last dream, I had some leisure from my mistress's service, so I went to disport me by the well of the oak tree, or forsooth she might have set in my mind the thought of going there, that I might meet thee and give her some occasion against me. And I sat thereby, nowise loving the earth but sick at heart, because of late the king's son had been more than ever instant with me to yield him my body, threatening me else with casting me into all that the worst could do. To me of torments and shames day by day. I say my heart failed me, and I was well nigh brought to the point of saying his desires, that I might take the chance of something befalling me that were less bad than the worst. But here must I tell thee a thing, and pray thee to take it to heart. This, more than aught else, had given me strength to naysay that dastard, that my wisdom both hath been, and now is, the wisdom of a wise maid, and not of a woman, and all the might thereof shall I lose with my maidenhead. Evil wilt thou think of me then, for all I was tried so sore, that I was at point to cast it all away, so wretchedly as I shrank from the horror of the lady's wrath. But there as I sat pondering these things, I saw a man coming, and thought no otherwise thereof but that it was the king's son, till I saw the stranger drawing near, and his golden hair, and his grey eyes, and then I heard his voice, and his kindness pierced my heart. And I knew that my friend had come to see me, and oh friend, these tears are for the sweetness of that past hour. Said Walter, I came to see my friend, I also. Now have I noted what thou badest me, and I will forbear all as thou commandest me, till we be safe out of the desert and far away from all evil things, but wilt thou ban me from all caresses? She laughed amidst of her tears, and said, Oh nay, poor lad, if thou wilt be but wise. Then she leaned toward him, and took his face betwixt her hands, and kissed him oft, and the tears started in his eyes for love and pity of her. Then she said, Alas, friend! Even yet mayst thou doom me guilty, and all thy love may turn away from me, when I have told thee all that I have done for the sake of thee and me. Oh, if then there might be some chastisement for the guilty woman, and not mere sundering. Fear nothing, sweetling, said he, for indeed I deem that already I know partly what thou hast done. She sighed and said, I will tell thee next, that I banned thy kissing and caressing of me till today, because I knew that my mistress would surely know if thou hadst so much as touched a finger of mine in love. It was to try me herein that on the morning of the hunting she kissed and embraced me till I almost died thereof, and showed thee my shoulder and my limbs, and to try thee withal, if thine eye should glister or thy cheek flush thereat, for indeed she was raging in jealousy of thee. Next, my friend, even whiles we were talking together at the well of the rock, I was pondering on what we should do to escape from this land of lies. Maybe thou wilt say, Why didst thou not take my hand and flee with me as we fled today? Friend, it is most true that were she not dead we had not escaped thus far. For her trackers would have followed us, set on by her, and brought us back to an evil fate. Therefore I tell thee that from the first I did plot the death of those two, the dwarf and the mistress. For no otherwise mightest thou live, or I escape from death and life. But as to the dastard who threatened me with the thrall's pains, I heeded him not to live or die, for well I knew that thy valiant sword, yea, or thy bare hands, would speedily tame him. Now first I knew that I must make a show of yielding to the king's son, and somewhat how I did therein, thou knowest. But no night and no time did I give him to bed me, till after I had met thee as thou wentest to the golden house before the adventure of fetching the lion's skin, and up to that time I had scarce known what to do, save ever to bid thee, with sore grief and pain, to yield thee to the wicked woman's desire. But as we spake together there by the stream, and I saw that the evil thing whose head thou clavest e'en now was spying on us, then amidst the sickness of terror which ever came over me whensoever I thought of him, and much more when I saw him, he is dead now, it came flashing into my mind how I might destroy my enemy. Therefore I made the dwarf my messenger to her, by bidding thee to my bed in such wise that he might hear it. And what thou well, that he speedily carried her the tidings. Meanwhile I hastened to lie to the king's son, and all privily bade him come to me and not thee. And thereafter, by dint of waiting and watching, and taking the only chance that there was, I met thee as thou camest back from fetching the skin of the lion that never was, and gave thee that warning, or else had we been undone indeed. Said Walter, Was the lion of her making, or of thine then? She said, Of hers. Why should I deal with such a matter? Yea, said Walter, but she verily swooned, and she was verily wroth with the enemy. The maid smiled, and said, If her lie was not like very sooth, then had she not been the craftsmaster that I knew her. One may lie otherwise than with the tongue alone. Yet indeed her wrath against the enemy was not feigned, for the enemy was even I. And in these latter days never did her wrath leave me. But to go on with my tale. Now doubt thou not, that, when thou camest into the hall yestereve, the mistress knew of thy counterfeit tryst with me, and meant not but death for thee. Yet first would she have thee in her arms again, therefore did she make much of thee at table. And that was partly for my torment also, and therefore did she make that tryst with thee, and deemed doubtless that thou wouldst not dare to forego it, even if thou shouldst go to me thereafter. Now I had trained the dastard to me as I have told thee, but I gave him a sleepy draught, so that when I came to the bed he might not move toward me nor open his eyes, but I lay down beside him, so that the lady might know that my body had been there. For well had she what if it had not. Then as there I lay I cast over him thy shape, so that none might have known but that thou wert lying by my side, and there, trembling, I abode what should befall. Thus I passed through the hour when as thou shouldest have been at her chamber, and the time of my tryst with thee was come as the mistress would be deeming, so that I looked for her speedily, and my heart well nigh failed me for fear of her cruelty. Presently then I heard a stirring in her chamber, and I slipped from out the bed, and hid me behind the hangings, and was like to die for fear of her, and lo, presently she came stealing in softly, holding a lamp in one hand and a knife in the other. And I tell thee of a sooth that I also had a sharp knife in my hand to defend my life if need were. She held the lamp up above her head before she drew near to the bedside, and I heard her mutter, She is not there then. But she shall be taken. Then she went up to the bed and stooped over it, and laid her hand on the place where I had lain, and there with her eyes turned to that false image of thee lying there, and she fell trembling and shaking, and the lamp fell to the ground and was quenched. But there was bright moonlight in the room, and still I could see what betid. But she uttered a noise like the low roar of a wild beast, and I saw her arm and hand rise up, and the flashing of the steel beneath the hand, and then down came the hand and the steel, and I went nigh to swooning lest perchance I had wrought over well. And thine image were thy very self. The dastard died without a groan. Why should I lament him? I cannot. But the lady drew him toward her, and snatched the clothes from off his shoulders and breast, and fell gibbering sounds mostly without meaning, but broken here and there with words. Then I heard her say, I shall forget, and the new days shall come. Then was there silence of her a little, and thereafter she cried out in a terrible voice, Oh no, no, no. I cannot forget, and she raised a great wailing cry that filled all the night with horror, didst thou not hear it, and caught up the knife from the bed and thrust it into her breast, and fell down a dead heap over the bed and on to the man whom she had slain. And then I thought of thee, and joy smote across my terror, how shall I gainsay it? And I fled away to thee, and I took thine hands in mine, thy dear hands, and we fled away together. Shall we be still together? He spoke slowly and touched her not, and she, forbearing all sobbing and weeping, sat looking wistfully on him. He said, I think thou hast told me all, and whether thy guile slew her, or her own evil heart, she was slain last night who lay in mine arms the night before. It was ill, and ill done of me, for I loved not her, but thee, and I wished for her death that I might be with thee. Thou wottest this, and still thou lovest me, it may be overweeningly. What have I to say then? If there be any guilt of guile, I also was in the guile, and if there be any guilt of murder, I also was in the murder. Thus we say to each other, and to God and his hallows we say, we two have conspired to slay the woman who tormented one of us and would have slain the other, and if we have done amiss therein, then shall we two together pay the penalty. For in this have we done as one body and one soul. Therewith he put his arms about her and kissed her, but soberly and friendly, as if he would comfort her. And thereafter he said to her, Maybe tomorrow, in the sunlight, I will ask thee of this woman what she verily was, but now let her be. And thou art overwearied, and I bid thee sleep. So he went about and gathered of bracken a great heap for her bed, and did his coat thereover, and led her thereto, and she lay down meekly, and smiled, and crossed her arms over her bosom, and presently fell asleep. But as for him, he watched by the fireside till dawn began to glimmer, and then he also laid him down and slept.